Hey guys, Ranger here, and welcome back to another reaction and review. And this is to the 5th episode of MLP, which is of season 9, which is The Point of No Return. Now, I've managed to avoid all spoilers with this episode, so I have no idea what this episode is about. I'm not sure if this is a continuation with the other guy, Grogar, or not. I have no idea because of the title. I don't know. I have no idea what this episode is about, so let's go ahead and begin because I'm very curious to jump into it. So let us begin starting the video in 3, 2, okay. Okay, starting the video in 3, 2, 1. Okay. I really love this episode. I really love this episode. For more, I really love this episode in more ways than one. This already, I gotta say, this is definitely one of my favorite episodes already of season 9, right here. And there's a lot actually going on in this episode to discuss. First off, this whole entire story setup honestly feels like something from back in season 1. Earlier in season 1, I believe it was, you had the scenario where Twilight was, or season 2, you had the episode where Twilight was fretting, like she was worrying herself sick about not learning a friendship lesson and not being able to send a friendship report to Princess Celestia. And she was fretting over it so much that she ended up using magic to put a sort of spell on a doll that attracted other ponies to it. This feels like it feels like a cross between a season 9 episode and a season 1 episode. The animation is from season 9, but it feels like a story that we would have seen back in season 9. And that's not a bad thing at all. Again, I love this episode for the simplicity and the unique and very simplistic and natural storytelling and very down-to-earth storytelling. And there's a lot to take from this episode personally for me. As I said, the story itself seems to go back to an earlier story that we would have seen back during season 1 or 2. There's nothing major going on in the background. Twilight's not having to try to save Equestria or anything like that, which I like. I like that not every episode features them having to do some sort of major, big, important task. It's just a simplistic thing. And in this episode, it's a very simplistic episode that actually glances back at the past whenever Twilight is whenever she's given a package that has a lot of stuff from whenever she was in Canterlot, which was like 3 or 4 years ago. And so she has all this stuff inside of this from her past. And it's very interesting because this is another thing that kind of glances back to the past. It's a sort of a reflection episode. And there's a scene that goes back that shows the beginning, which I will detail later whenever I get to that part. But it's interesting because Twilight, just like what would have happened in season 1, begins to fret over the concept of an overdue book. And she begins to pace back and forth and worry about this. And Twilight, it's interesting because at first, like I said, anything else, if this honestly was anything else other than MLP, I would have said that this woman would have been dead. She would have been dead, and the final leg of Twilight's journey would have led her to the graveyard. That's what it kind of would have been funny, but morbid at the same time, had they been able to have went that route. Any other show that was not MLP, they probably could have done that. And they actually could have done it with actually, I'm sure somebody could easily write a fan fiction or do a comic about that, which would actually be comical, is like an alternate ending, where it turns out this woman is dead. And Twilight, kind of in a bit of an insane moment, she begins to dig the woman up so she could put the book in the casket with her. I'd actually like to read a fan fiction about that. If someone someone doesn't have to, I could do it. But again, if this wasn't MLP, I would think, you know what, that's where it's going to end. But as I said, we get a glimpse that goes back to the beginning, that shows shows the scene from the very first episode of MLP, from episode 1, season 1, where they're preparing for Moondancer's birthday party. And the interesting thing, I cannot tell. The animation for this scene does not look. I can't be 100% certain, but the animation for this scene here does not look like it's the original clip used. It definitely sounds like they revoiced. It honestly sounds like they reanimate. It looks and sounds like they reanimated this whole scene again, because the animation looks different than it did in the first episode. And the voice acting is also different. It sounds different too. So it looks like they actually went forth with the effort to reanimate and revoice this entire scene again, which is honestly really cool that they went through the effort instead of just simply taking, the easy way out and reusing an old clip. But Twilight frets heavily over the concept of having an overdue book. And there's a few different things going on here. First off, she had a perfect record, and this is very interesting because Twilight is kind of a perfectionist. She has an overdue library, she has an overdue book, and she's afraid of the consequences here, that maybe she'll get kicked out of the library, she'll have to pay a huge late fee, and that she won't be allowed in the library again. And so she's honestly afraid of all of this, and she's also concerned with maintaining her perfect record. So the funny thing about this particular scene was whenever this girl looks at the card and sees the late fee, and instead of acting like it's no big deal, instead Twilight kind of gets a little bit reprimanded for it. And the funny thing here is about how Twilight acknowledges this whole thing, like, laying it on pretty thick, aren't you? Like, Twilight is already feeling bad enough, and it's very cool that they did this. Another thing that I also love about this scene is that Twilight's status played no part in this. Like, Twilight's the princess of friendship, and this girl could have tried to have made it sound easier because Twilight is a princess, but no. Instead, she lays it on thick and makes Twilight feel guilty enough as it is. And another thing to make a mention about is the amazing reintroduction of Moondancer ever since back in season 5, which many have called the season of feels. I've been wanting to see Moondancer again. Now, we did get to see her, I believe, in part 2 of the season 9 opener, but it was just a glimpse. Here we actually hear her voice. It's awesome that we actually got to see Moondancer again. I was honestly hoping that we would get to see her again before the show would end. And to see her again this time around, it's really great, and I'm very happy that we got to see her again. This is also a very kind of a very interesting and very unique segment here, is whenever Twilight thinks that because of her overdue book, that she got this woman fired. That was her fault. And honestly, yeah, this honestly is kind of a scary thing. It's definitely frightening. Twilight manages to track this woman down at a retirement home. And the interesting thing here is whenever these other people at the retirement home began to make mentions about the things that this woman was doing, I began to see that she was not miserable. She was enjoying life. She was having fun, enjoying the golden age, and she was just enjoying her freedom. And I honestly had a bit of a bad feeling about this episode. I did at first. I was afraid that this episode was actually going to end with a sort of an open-ended, not exactly a happy end. And I'm very happy that it did not go that way. What I was fearful for what would happen was that this woman would blame Twilight for getting her fired. But it's in the past. Twilight can't do anything about it. There's nothing she can do. There's nothing this woman could do. And so, that's just it. And it would end with the moral being, or the message being, that sometimes you can't fix a mistake. I'm honestly glad they didn't go with that, because that would be depressing as crap. But as it turns out, Twilight, there's a few different elements here to look at. First off, this woman explains to Twilight that because Twilight's book was overdue, this woman wasn't fired from her job, but instead, she willingly quit. And Twilight kind of learned something here as well, and there's an interesting connection here. Both of these two were perfectionists. And there's an interesting thing. This woman was, as you can tell, she was already older. She was already much older than Twilight whenever she was working at the library just 3 or 4 years prior. Or 5 years. But she learned at a very late age that not everything has to be perfect. Don't be afraid to take a chance. Don't be afraid to make a mistake, to fail at something. Just take a chance and enjoy life. And it's kind of an interesting thing here, because Twilight is a lot younger than this woman. And Twilight is learning that lesson now. She's learning that she doesn't have to be a perfectionist at everything, that not everything has to be perfect, that even beauty can come in something that is not perfect. Something doesn't have to be perfect. Something cannot be perfect, but still be beautiful. It can still be fun. And Twilight is able to learn from example. Twilight is able to learn with this woman as an example, that Twilight needs to enjoy life and not focus on everything being perfect all the time. Not be afraid to let her hair down or leave it down and have a little fun. Just kind of get a little crazy. Don't focus on perfectionism. And don't fret over something like that. And that sometimes you have to just let that go and focus and just live your life. And that's a very good moral here, is that you and it's kind of funny, because in a way, I can kind of relate to both characters here. There are some things for me that I'm kind of a bit of a perfectionist on. However, I'm more like this woman right now, in that I know that not everything has to be perfect. Although it can be hard sometimes. For whenever I'm building a model kit, I want it to be perfect. I'm not happy unless it is perfect. I don't want to settle for anything less than something amazing. I want it to look great. And I'm going to work at it until I get it good. Until I make it look the way that I want it to. Now, I know some would apply that, but I'm not the kind of person who is just going to, like with a model kit, accept something just bland. But this woman, she said that she pretty much locked herself away in that library because she was concerned with maintaining a perfect record. She was kind of confining herself. But once Twilight's book was overdue, and this woman's perfect record was no longer applicable. Then she realized that it didn't matter. Life wasn't over because of that. Instead, her life kind of just began. She was able to let loose and enjoy life, and she took on all these different hobbies and things, and just is enjoying the remainder of her life. Twilight, I think, now sees this with this woman, and maybe might be able, hopefully, will learn that from this woman. And honestly, it's a really good moral that, I mean, there are people out there that are perfectionists, and you try to focus on something and make it perfect, but not everything is going to be perfect. And sometimes you just have to, I mean, you don't have to accept the mundane. You don't have to accept the bland all the time. Strive for something good, but don't be afraid that if it doesn't turn out completely perfect, don't let it keep you from living your life. And here she was able to do exactly that. She was able to live her life. And so Twilight, instead of getting this woman fired, Twilight actually helped this woman to get out and enjoy her life. And I think that Twilight kind of sees this now. And whenever Twilight reads the title of the book, whenever Twilight reads the title of the book, which is Perfection, pretty much Perfection, the Art of the Impossible, it's a really good meaning. It's a really good it's a really good solid saying that it is hard to strive for something to be perfect, because most things are not going to be perfect. You're going to have flaws. You're going to have imperfections in something. And sometimes, no matter how hard you strive to make something perfect, it's not always going to turn out that way. But the key is to let that go and not let it hold you back, not let it keep you from enjoying your life, and be happy with what it is, with what you have. And I think that can also apply to life as well. Like, you might not live the perfect life. You might not have all that you want in life or be doing all that you want in life, but it's okay, definitely, to dream and to strive for that. I don't believe in dreaming and nothing else. I do believe in striving for things that you want and what you want. But at the same time, enjoy life. Be happy with what you got, but reach for your goals at the same time. And here, whenever Twilight reads the title of the book, it's pretty much like a in-your-face sort of thing, where Twilight realizes that she has been doing all of this perfection. She's been doing this perfectionism the entire time, trying to maintain her perfect record and trying to make sure this woman maintains hers. And here, Twilight is able to see that she was fretting over something silly, and that she needs as well. And I love this. Honestly, this is adorable. There are really some absolutely adorable Twilight moments in this episode, which I'm going to cover some of these. But another thing is whenever Twilight finds out that the late fee for the book is totally fine. I mean, isn't that much? Twilight asks about keeping her picture up there. I like that. I like it because, not because Twilight is selfish, not because she's concerned with trying to maintain an image, but it's natural. It's totally real. One of the things that sometimes can get annoying is whenever, I mean, don't get me wrong, I mean, I absolutely love the show, and the morals that the characters have learned have been great, but sometimes seeing a character learn a lesson and then completely adapt to it 100%, just like that, it can a lot of times feel unrealistic because in real life, in reality, in actuality, it takes time to adjust. Twilight still kind of having to try to let go of her no longer being the perfectionist at this library and not having her picture up there. It's more natural for her to be slowly letting that go. I know some would probably say that Twilight was acted inappropriately at that she acted like she didn't learn her lesson whatsoever. Again, in my eyes, this was more natural because whenever you sometimes, just like, I mean, in real life, you learn something like that. You learn a moral, you learn something new, um, and it's a break from something different than you're used to, and you have to adjust. You have to readapt yourself. You've been in a flow, in a rhythm for so long that now trying a new rhythm, breaking away from the original path where you were going down, it's not something that you can just adapt to all at once. It takes some time, more time for different people to readjust and adapt to this new rhythm. And Twilight is, even though she just learned the lesson, to me it's more natural that she's still at first was concerned about her record, but then Spike was basically reminding her that hey, you just learned a lesson. And Twilight here at the end is learning to let it go. She hasn't fully let it go. It's a process. And it's, to me, that's much more realistic and natural. And I love that in this show, in this episode, it's more realistic and natural. It's not just, it's totally easy peasy, 1, 2, 3 easy, where a character learns something and then boom, everything's totally fine and they know it and they're able to adjust just like that. I love that it takes a more natural and realistic approach where a character has to, like real life, like we do, it's a process. We have to take sometimes baby steps to fully adjust and overcome something, try a new rhythm and break away from the old rhythm that we were used to. And Twilight mentioning at the end that the stain on the book, that's what makes it perfect. The stain on the book, because the book wasn't perfect on the outside. It's a really good metaphor, honestly, for different things in life. And it actually, first off, it is a really good reference. It says that not all things are going to look or be 100% perfect, but they, in your eyes, can still be perfect, even if maybe not by somebody else's standards. And that is really true because there are different things that different people can look at. Person A can look at something and in their eyes it will be perfect, but person B can look at the exact same thing and they're going to look at person A and say, dude, what are you thinking? There's something wrong with this. But, different things appeal to different people. And here, this book is kind of like a metaphor for Twilight, I think, herself now. And I see 3 metaphors, personally. I see 3 I see 3 different metaphors that this book is a meaning for. First off, like I said, it's that perfectionism sometimes, if you strive for perfection, you may keep striving and never achieve it. And sometimes it is impossible to achieve. Because sometimes if you're a perfectionist, it may, no matter how hard you try, you may never reach a point that you are happy with something because you are always in a constant motion trying to perfect it. And because you're a perfectionist, it will never be completely perfect. This is the more severe case of this, and I know this is a thing. But the first metaphor that I see is just what I said. It means that it's perfect in Twilight's eyes because of what it represents, what it means. Someone else might see it as a dirty book, but Twilight sees it as something being perfect to her because of the personal value and emotional attachment that she has to it. The second metaphor is, you could say, that it's kind of a reference to life, in that someone else would say it's not perfect, it's maybe something that you're doing, maybe a project, and someone else would say, well, it's not perfect, but you're happy with it, and so that's what matters. The third metaphor that I kind of see with this is it can also reference people, in that none of us are perfect. Some of us strive to be perfect, but we'll never achieve that. And the book can kind of represent people. The pages, the story of what is on the inside. But on the outside, you got a blemish. You got maybe some scars, some scratches, and sometimes people will judge a book by its cover. But inside, the cover might not look like much, but on the inside, there's a really great story to be told. You just got to read it. And I think the book can represent people, in that if you just crack open that cover, you may find there's a really great story there to read. You just got to open that book, which is basically taught to that person. Try to make a friend. Who knows? That might be the best book or the best friend you've ever had. And I actually see a connection between books and people, and that's personally the way that I look at it. And so I think that the book can be a metaphor for people in general. And I think it also can work for Twilight. Twilight isn't perfect. And that's one of the things that I love about MLP, is that it's shown over time that these characters aren't perfect, and it's wrong for any of us to think that these characters are. They have little quirks and things about their personality that may irk other characters in the show, and they may irk us sometimes, but it's real. It's natural. These characters aren't perfect. They are natural. They are realistic. And so I think that this book can also represent Twilight herself. Maybe a blemish here and there, but there's a lot of story that has been told, and her story's not finished yet. And it may have some dings and dents on the outside. It may have had a little bit of wear, but that doesn't mean that it's not a good book. And that's kind of what I see here, is maybe Twilight sees a correlation between this book and her life. All the things that she's went through. She's taken some hits, but she's learned a lot. She's come a long way, and she's not done. And so I think Twilight could also possibly, I'm not saying that's what she's thinking here, but I kind of see a correlation between Twilight and the book. The book can kind of represent Twilight's life, what happened to it, the kind of the beatings it's taken, but that it's still a good book, and it's still going strong. And again, Twilight, I think at the end is realizing that, there's still some things that she, of course, is learning, which is that you can't always strive for perfectionism, because you're not always going to achieve it. And there's a couple of different things to look at. I'm certainly not whatsoever saying be okay with the mundane, be okay with mediocrity. I don't believe in that. I don't believe in just being okay with just whatever. And I don't believe in being just okay with something that is mediocre. I don't believe in just accepting things and just settling for something. I do believe in striving for your goals, striving for your dreams, and working and and putting forth effort to make those happen. Will they happen? It's not a guarantee that they will, but I think this is also could, be a pretty good metaphor for that is, you know, if you get knocked down, get back up, try again, or try something else. And there are times where we can strive to be perfect on something or with something or try to be perfect ourselves, but if we try to be perfect as human beings, we're never going to achieve that. It's not going to happen. None of us are perfect. We're all flawed. We all have a story to tell. Some a longer story than others, some with more action and adventure than others. But the fact is, you kind of have to know a limit. I think there's a good balance. I think you have to know a limit between between if you're actually reaching for an unreachable goal and striving for perfectionism, or if the goal that you're trying to reach can be reached. And whenever you reach that goal, will you be happy with it? And I think that's kind of an interesting a question. And like, for example, and I think this is a really good comparison, is Rainbow Dash. Her goal was always to be a Wonderbolt, and she strived to better herself with flying and try to be faster so that she could be a Wonderbolt. She dreamed of being dreamed of being a Wonderbolt, and she wasn't striving for perfection, and she wasn't striving for a goal on top of another goal. Her goal was to be a Wonderbolt. Once she became a Wonderbolt, that was her goal. She has thoughts of being captain of the Wonderbolts, but she's mature enough and reasonable enough that she knows that there's only so far that she can go with that. And now that she's a Wonderbolt, she's content with that. And now her goal set has changed from trying to be a Wonderbolt to being a Wonderbolt, focusing on that and being the best that she can. She's not striving to be the best Wonderbolt. Well, okay, in her mind sometimes maybe, but she's agreed before that she's always tried to be the best flyer. But now that she's with the Wonderbolts, she's happy with just fitting in. She's happy with being where she is. And I think that's a really good reference to life as well, is you have to kind of take a step back and think, is the goal that you're reaching for, can you achieve it? Is it achievable? Can you reach that goal? Or is it something that you're never going to be able to achieve? Perfectionism. If you're trying to perfect something, can you reach it? I think you have to maybe envision it in your mind, how you can reach what you're trying to do. If it's beyond your skill set and you can't reach it, then maybe you just have to, maybe you just have to be okay with with what you can do. But I know that as, fan fiction writers, fan artists, and such, and musicians as well, I know a lot of people in the Brony community and outside the Brony community. I've seen a lot of people that are like, my art is crap, but they have amazing art. Because even though their art is amazing, they're not where they want to be because it's not perfect in their eyes, but other people love it. And I think and I can kind of relate to that. I think my writing sucks. I've had a few people tell me that my writing is great, and I'm very flattered for that, but it's an interesting thing, and it's kind of an ongoing, ever-going battle between us, like in ourselves, to try to be great at something, try to improve, always improve. And this actually kind of is a difficult subject to touch upon because there's many different variations of how you can look at it. And some people are just okay with the mundane. They just settle for mediocrity. Others want more than that, and they strive for more and more and more. Others can strive for something, but they have a set goal, and once they reach that goal, they're content with staying there. And so, like I said, it can be a difficult thing. But I do think that this episode is a really good touch upon that, and I love this episode because it's of the simplicity and natural feel of the story. And again, it's just a natural, very warm, very sweet, very fun episode. And like I said, there were other things that I wanted to talk about in this episode as well. One of the interesting things that I absolutely loved in this episode was Derpy making a return. And I thought, honestly, that she wasn't going to have a speaking line, but no, instead, she actually had a speaking line she got to speak in this episode, which is great. If this had been any other season besides season 9, I honestly don't think she would have spoke. She would just gave a wave and flew off. But considering this is a final episode, I can understand them making her speak because this is a final season. So, pretty much wrapping everything up. Other things, this entire episode was just adorable in that Twilight, how she acted in this episode. This Twilight acted in this episode like she did back in season 1 and season 2. Twilight did not. She did acknowledge herself as being the princess of friendship in this, but she didn't handle herself like a princess. She handled herself in the same way that she normally would have before, and with kind of doing all these crazy antics like windsurfing and basically traversing all over Equestria trying to track this woman down. And I love that they went this route and didn't have Twilight doing like trying. I love that Twilight was just her natural Twilight self here. Her regal stance played no part in this episode, really. No major big part. It was just a minor reference, but it really had no major part in it. Twilight was just her normal self. And it's great to see that happen. Like I said, whenever Twilight takes a tumble from windsurfing, I love this scene because having Twilight finish windsurfing and be fine would have been too perfect. It would have been too good because I love it that here Twilight has no experience with windsurfing, and I love that she took a tumble because she's not experienced with doing this. And it makes it feel more realistic, more natural in real life that, someone who's never tried something before, they're not going to be great at it the first time. They're going to have a tumble. And honestly, this bit where Twilight sees this guy's nose and she just stands there with this eye twitch. Yeah, I love this. I absolutely love this scene. It's so cute. But this episode, honestly, like I said prior, this episode was interesting in how everything flowed. Because here, Twilight has the experience that she has had. All the stuff she's been through, all the adventures, all the friendship lessons, having wings, being the princess of friendship. Just because you still learn that does not mean that it's going to drastically alter your personality. And this episode definitely felt like something from back in season 1 with that, because Twilight here, she was doing her normal, what Pinky said, her normal Twilighting. Which, classic Twilighting, where she was fretting severely over this whole thing. And it was very interesting to see this whole thing play out. And I made a mention that there was one other thing that took place at closer to the end of the episode, where Twilight ends up rubbing her arm. It's a very cute, very little shy move for Twilight. It's a very cute, very shy little move for Twilight. That here she blushes, and here she blushes and has this little uneasy, shy smile, and she's rubbing her arm. This is very cute. It's very cute, and it's absolutely adorable and sweet to see that even though Twilight is a princess, she's still natural Twilight. She's totally Twilight. And this is just a very sweet, very adorable, very fun episode. Whenever they find out that the bit cost is actually just 28 bits, and that's it, that it caps out at the end of a month. I'm not sure about real libraries if they do that. I've never actually taken a book out of my local library. Yeah, insert shock Twilight face here. Um, I never have actually, but I'm curious. Do libraries actually have a money? Do they actually have a cap at a certain period, or like what happens? What happens? I don't know. But again, I really love this episode. It's definitely one of my favorite episodes of season 9. It's a very cute, very sweet episode. It's very warm. It's simplistic in its storytelling. It feels natural and just very warm, very mellow. And it's a very fun, entertaining episode. And I really love this episode. It's definitely one of my favorites of season 9. So again, Hasbro, everybody for working on Hasbro, everybody that worked on this episode. Thank you all so much. Thank you, everybody so much for another great episode, and for an episode again that kind of felt like a season 1 episode. Not to say that the other seasons were bad. I love them personally, but again, this kind of felt like a season 1 episode with the crazy zany antics of Twilight, just frantic over something so simple. But again, thank you to everybody again for this great episode. Thank you to everybody that worked on this episode. And again, thank you guys again for joining me. Hope you guys enjoyed. And again, let me know what you guys think in the comments as well. Thanks again for joining me. Hopefully I'll see you guys in the next video that I do. Take care.